Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Darkstone Dossiers with your host, Anthony Darkstone.
Well, thank you very much. As you've heard, my name is Anthony Darkstone. And buonasera a tutti, bonsoir, buonanotte, buenas noches, and guten Abend. But a very good afternoon to everybody in the United States. The gentleman you're about to meet, it's probably easier to tell you the countries he hasn't performed in and places on the planet that he hasn't been than it is to tell you all the places that he's been. In a moment, I'm going to introduce you to the president of the Society of American Magicians, Dr. Joel Zaritsky. I'm delighted to tell you that in the last few days, our guest, Mr. Kevin James, has now become a member of the Society of American Magicians. He is also a member of our International Assembly. Very quickly, for those of you who may need to know, do not have to be an American to belong to the Society of American Magicians. We welcome everybody as long as you have two things: a respect and a passion for the art of magic. I will now briefly introduce you to the president of the Society of American Magicians, Dr. Joel Zaritsky.
Hi, everybody. How's it going? I am so excited for tonight to see Kevin James, who I have loved to watch on stage and TV. So I'm just so excited about this whole thing. Thanks for having me.
To start this show, how on earth do I possibly summarize in a sentence or two or 10 or 100 what our guest has done and who he is? The short answer is, although I'm a wordsmith, I cannot. So, with his permission, a wonderful clip, which is probably more eloquent than anything I could ever say about our guest. So, we will run the clip. You'll get a feel of the gentleman, his talent, his creativity, and then we'll go talk to him after the clip. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from Las Vegas, Nevada, Mr. Kevin James.
Hi, Anthony. Thanks for having me.
Not at all, Kevin. Thank you so much for making time in your busy schedule, I know, well, you're busier than most people. No, that wasn't a quip. That's true, because if you're not performing, you're busy inventing and creating. So it is a busy schedule to make the time for us and come and share a little bit of your talent. We can't possibly have the time to share it all, but it's a little bit of your talent with the SAM and all our friends from the Magic Circle, the IBM, and indeed elsewhere at other countries that are watching. Those who were very observant at the beginning would have noticed that it says under your name, Creative Entertainment, because unlike most magicians who refer to themselves as creative, you, in my opinion, and indeed of others, take that level of creativity, maybe kick it up a couple of notches. This is shown by the types of illusions that you do. So the burning question I think I want to ask you straight off the bat is, how, when, why, where? How does this all happen? Do you go for long walks, lie in a hammock, scribble on pads? Where does all this come from?
It's a weird animal coming up with ideas for the show. they come from so many different places. It's not the same way for all of them at all. It's they all come from different places. Like sometimes I can be inspired by music or something in cinema or a life experience, or there's a lot of various ways to approach it, and sometimes it's out of need. Like I'll need like a ballad in the show, something that I can or fill a certain amount of time, or I try to find various emotions throughout the whole show. I don't want to be the same, tell the same song, with everything. So just trying to find, sometimes it's shocking. Sometimes I want something nostalgic or something that's sweet and innocent, or just some eye candy. But most of the time, I try to find some kind of emotional connection that I can hang a hook on. And sometimes I'll have a method and go, this is a great method. Let's find some way to use it. A lot of different ways.
This, I think, is the answer that I guess a lot of people expected, because that is where creativity, it's a bit like walking up to Da Vinci and saying, well, how do you paint? So that's a great answer that you've given, because the sources of creativity are from everywhere. Now, a lot of people, myself included, have a kind of signature piece. Some folks have 2 or 3. I was talking to you the other day, and I could not for the life of me say, well, this is Kevin's signature piece. This is Kevin's signature. You have so many signature pieces. You talk to one person and they'll go, yeah, the snowstorm. You talk to another person, they go, oh, yeah, the op. You talk to someone else and they'll say Chaplin. And it just goes on. It's just, this is the level of your creativity. When you talked about emotional hooks, personally and professionally, I'm thrilled to hear that phrase, because sadly, not too many people in magic understand that. You've got to have that pathos, the drama, the kind of, whatever, or the laughter. So you embody that in a show. So how do you kind of structure that? Is that for each different client, or a producer says, hey, I want you to do this in Brazil, for example, and we need this to appeal to Brazilian audiences? Could you share a little bit of the thinking behind that?
At first it was just what kind of jobs I was getting in my career. It was just trying to come up with the best, 3 to 5 minutes for a TV show.
Mm-hmm.
Come up with one piece that's really good that you can sell on TV show. And then I started to really develop a larger act, maybe 10 minutes for casinos. They just needed to throw me into the middle of a production show, and I had to hit them across the head with 10 minutes. Be funny and fast and different. You're competing with the best juggler in the world. You're competing with, some amazing animal actor. You know what I mean? So it's like you have to stand out. So you were limited by time. So I had 10 minutes to really do something spectacular. And now the last period here has been with The Illusionist, and we get a little more freedom. It's 6 or 7 magicians in the show, so I'm up to about 20 to 25 minutes in the show of just my stuff. So I can start to add bigger pieces. But then also I'm working on my own solo show. So now I've got to come up with 90 minutes to 2 hours of really good material. So you can really stretch things out and really find those connective pieces to put between the signature pieces. And so now I'm thinking of, what's the best way to take all, these things that I know work on their own, and how do you tie them together with one sort of storyline, and how do I create things that can connect them together and make sense, and how do you build a flow, and peaks and valleys. And so it kind of depends on what you're trying to create and sell, like what your market is.
Right.
So, and the thing is when you're creating stuff, write it all down. It doesn't matter how insignificant the idea is. You never know when you're going to need it. For instance, when I first started The Illusionist, the producer came to me and said, what if size and money were no object? Because it was always like, I knew people that said, if it doesn't fit in a box this big that fits under the seat in front of me on the airplane, it's not going to get in my show. Well, I always thought that was a little strict, and I found that out with the operation is that a lot of people said don't do it because it takes a lot of special people and it takes a lot of props, and 5, 6 assistants on stage, and so it's kind of an expensive thing to do. I found out that if it's something really unique and really good, the producers, they'll pay for it. So the thing is just to try to do the create the best stuff you can, and write it all down. I had worked on an idea for producing a bunch of people, 6 to 10 people, like a finale of a cast. The producer of The Illusionist said, what if time or money and size were no object? Yeah. So then I said, okay, let me really work on this. So I got down to the nuts and bolts of it and came up with something called the cast appearance. And just having that vehicle, being in The Illusionist, allowed me to get it built and to work on it and to get it in the show. So it's you just never know when those ideas are going to be needed, and they're things that you could just be a little scribble in a notebook, and then all of a sudden the need appears, or the chance. What if you get your own TV show or your own TV special, or your own social media show? You're going to need a lot of that material. So don't ever dismiss any little notion or idea, and write them all down. Keep them somewhere.
I think that if there is a secret, I guess that's the secret to creativity, and more so for people in the performing arts, and especially magic. As I understood it, Hemingway did something very, very similar. Rather than sit down at a typewriter and a couple of bottles of scotch, he would just jot things down, and then, as you rightly have pointed out, bring them all together. And the story goes, that's how For Whom the Bell Tolls came about, in the Spanish Civil War. And that. So in magic, I guess, coming from a master illusionist like yourself is really sound. Well, advice seems such a lame word, doesn't it? Good suggestions of how to use your creativity. It begins, I guess, would you agree, with a pencil and a notepad,
and a desire to do it.
Yep.
I have friends that say, "Oh, I could never come up with ideas," and I think it's just not true. I think if you want to, and Gaetan Bloom is a close friend of mine, and I think his approach is one of the best I've ever heard. Is that just live life with curiosity. There are things like how does a light switch work? Well, take it apart and put it back together. And how does an airplane stay in the air? It's just like keep dropping all this information about life and the world into your brain, and eventually, you're just going to start. You'll have a need, and your subconscious will start connecting dots. And if you hear a piece of music, jot it down and say, you know what? I like the way this music makes me feel. I'll use it. Or have something written similar to it. Or think about your character and say, what would my character be natural in using? What would my character hold? Or what could I see my character doing? And just make a big list of just items that you think would be interesting to use. And then figure out, what your market is and how much, what kind of things you need. Right now I'm working on some things that have the premise of social distancing. Find topics that are current that you can hang a routine on.
Einstein, I love his work, and you've just reminded me of a quote of his, which was, and the quote goes, "It's not that I'm very intelligent, it's just that I'm very curious." Yeah. So this is so Gaetan. I don't know him as well as you. I've met him, and I have a fantastic photograph on stage of a very dear friend of mine, Grand Prix winner at FISM, Norbert Frey from France, on stage, actually kneeling and kissing Gaetan's hand. I met him a couple of times. I think Frank Zach, Frank in Vegas, he introduced me, I think, to him. Anyway, the reason I want to bring him up is because I want to talk to you about him and your relationship and how this creativity boomed. Before we do, I'm going to ask for a still of a picture of Gaetan with a deck of cards. Now, I want everybody to take a moment and just look at that, okay? I deliberately avoided talking about the boxing gloves, all right? But that is kind of Gaetan and what Kevin was talking about, the way he thinks. Now, there's a whole backstory here, and I just want to keep quiet and let Kevin talk about his relationship with Deergate and Monsieur Bloom and the boxing gloves and everything else. So, Kevin, please share with us.
Yeah, well, that routine is super funny. It's like he created that to try to parody the fact that like Cardini would wear gloves to do card manipulations, and that it just makes it so much harder. Well, he just took it a step further and go, how could it be completely impossible? So he does a really funny manipulation act with boxing gloves on, and yeah, it's a great routine.
It's kind of funny when you're watching it, and lay people would look at it and go, hey, that's really cute. But, you know, people who've been in this business a little while go, yeah, you know what? It's hard enough with a pair of cotton gloves, but this man's doing it with boxing gloves. I mean, you know, great. What can you say? That summarizes, I think, the level of creative. Who would have thought it? Now, you've had a good relationship with him in so much that would the right word be influenced you or inspired you or chatted with you and traded ideas? How would you describe that?
Yeah, you know, I have a small group of magicians that are like family to me that I can feel super comfortable brainstorming ideas with, and I'm lucky. I've got some super creative friends that are ultra nice people, and I trust them implicitly. And you know, it's Gaetan and it's Raphael from Belgium and Adrian Soler from Barcelona, and you know, we do in fact, we do a Zoom chat each other, you know, with each other once a week, just to keep our sanity and to brainstorm on ideas. And it's you know, we started it, you know, this summer when the pandemic is, you know, at its height. And I'm just going, you know, I need to like snap out of this. And so I got these guys together and we started working on lots of ideas, and they're just a joy to be chatting with all the time.
Mr. James, would you please kindly turn me into a fly on the wall at your next session? I'm sure there's plenty of people who would agree with that. How cool would that be to eavesdrop on you guys? Don't join in, just be a fly and just listen to, you know, to ideas going back and forth. Yeah, I know one person, in fact, for sure, jumping at the bit, and that's most illustrious. He loves nothing better than that, just getting together with people and what we used to call chewing the fat. Yeah, but no, we have to be polite and go brainstorming Zoom sessions. Yeah, but I know what you mean, and most folks watching here will get a pretty good idea. Now, I wanted to talk about a couple of folks that you work with. You know, there's plenty of people. I can't possibly list them all. I have no idea if they're here watching. If you are, thank you for being here. One of them is one of the ladies you had in your show, several shows, Holly England. Pure coincidence. I have a column in MUM, which is the official monthly publication of the SAM, called Magic Around the World, and it just so happens, pure coincidence, she's going to be featured next month along with Christian Hulstedt from Norway. And I found out yesterday, would you believe, she's already in this month's or next month's issue of Vanish magazine as well. You've also had and have a great deal of time for a three-legged gentleman called Rudy, who is who Dan, four-legged gentleman. Yeah, I always call him three-legged, whatever. Who Dan and Carol Garrett, dear friends, who refer to him as their adopted son. Mike Caveney, of course. Oh my gosh, Arturo Bracetti. And then, of course, you have, shall we say, closer to home, in one way, your very good lady Claudia, who you told me comes from a magic family, so magic in her DNA. So that's very useful, and we'll put up some pictures of that in a little while. And then, of course, I have to laugh because he always makes me laugh. A wonderful, wonderful man. That everybody who loves him calls him affectionately Little Antonio. It's not a derogatory remark, it's an affectionate remark. And the last time I saw him was in Vegas, and I was telling Kevin, just very fast story. I was sitting there with my brother and Christian Dossiers and Little Antonio, and I was so tired from flights and no sleep, I just fell asleep into a cup of coffee. Boom, I just fell into it. Yeah, Kevin thought that was hilarious, and so did they, and then they woke me up after 20 minutes or whatever. I first met him when he was with another good buddy in Vegas, Steve Daly in Showgirls of Magic, going back, what, maybe 18, 20 years ago, something like that? Easily. And he's such a nice man. We have some clips of you and him off stage. Es Don Antonio Hoyos con El Maestro Kevin James. We have another one of you with Antonio where he's chaplain, I believe. You do this amazing thing with him as chaplain. We're not going to give it away because people got to buy. Oh, there it is. Let's pull it up.
Coming to life.
And I think we have one here, which is from an evening newspaper, which is a daily newspaper in London called the Evening Standard. And there's the front page when you were performing in England of yourself. There it is. We'll pull it up. There's yourself. The lady crouching there is the nurse. In fact, is Mrs. James, Claudia, your lady. And, of course, Antonio there with the famous Operation Illusion there. And I think we have one more of the pair of you together, if I'm not mistaken. There it is, and that's Claudia coming on stage. Not as a nurse this time. I have no idea what she's doing there, but I've seen this illusion so many times, and I love it. I just absolutely adore it.
She's in charge of all the assistants. She's like the boss of the minions.
There she is again. Yes, still being the boss of the minions. Yes.
Keeps them all in line.
Yeah, wonderful lady. And I know you were saying to me in our private conversation, she's a great source of inspiration. She's not just your lady and your wife. She's actually a kind of, inspiration and a director, and generally a wonderful, marvelous, magical wife that also goes to work with you, and that's great. We've talked about illusions, and I have a clip of you where perhaps not everybody knows that you are a pretty amazing close-up sleight of hand guy and a parlor magician. Most people, Kevin James, it's a snowstorm, the operation cutting the guy in half and so on. Technically, you're also extremely good with that. I'm sorry, before we run the clip, were you going to say something, Kevin, please?
It's just because that's how we all have to start. We start with smaller stuff. Yeah, I won a Parlor Magician of the Year at the Castle one year.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I know. and you're an MIMC at the Magic Circle. Yeah, indeed.
But I still love it. I find myself creating stuff for a larger audience with a handheld camera. So I'm still creating small stuff.
I remember the time I felt, and my son, who doesn't do magic anymore, but he used to a lot, when we first saw you on television, I believe it was, when you walked into the audience and you did what we call the flash rose, yes? Just, wow, just unbelievable. I believe we have a clip, which I would love to share that emotion I felt by letting people watch this clip.
You're creating something like magic, you have to think backwards. What's the most amazing thing I could do? And then work your way backwards to try to figure out how to do that. It's a great creative art form that just lets you do anything you want. In the magic world, usually you have the inventors and then you have the performers, and I'm one of the few that do both. I don't want to give up either one. My name is Kevin James, and I'm the inventor. Kids are the hardest people on the planet to fool because their minds are so open still. The scientist thinks he knows everything about everything. They're the easiest to fool. If you say, hey, this bottle is made of glass, then they start to get suspicious. Well, is it really made of glass? Let me check it out. But if you just show the bottle, pour some water out, show it to them, then they're already at point, B, C, and D before you do something else with it. So playing on the audience assumptions is a great technique that magicians use to deceive. Magicians, I feel, are the most honest people on the planet because we tell you we're going to deceive you. And then we deceive you. I think magic can have the same power that a singer can have. You're listening to a song on the radio and you go, I know exactly what he's talking about. They're singing my song. They know how I feel inside. And I think magicians can have that same level of connection with the audience. You just have to find the right story and find the right point of view. And I think that's when magic can reach its highest level, is to elicit those beautiful memories and emotions. It just takes it to a whole nother art form.
Wow. I never tired of that because I love magic. Yes, I'm a performer director. I don't care, but I just love watching good magic. And I will never, ever forget the way myself and my son felt. I've mentioned this before, and I have to say it again. If you've not seen it, please, please buy a ticket sometime and go watch it. Kevin moving into the audience, selecting somebody, making that rose dance, and turning it into a real rose. This is what you talked about earlier about emotion, where you're involving one person, but an entire theater. I don't have the adjective to describe that. What was the thought behind that, Kevin? Did you kind of go, well, I need to, get some time ready while they're loading stuff on the stage, so what should I do? Go on the apron when they close the curtains or go into the audience? What was the thought process on that?
It was complete out of necessity. I was doing strolling magic in restaurants and passing my business card out to do private parties, and I needed to create something a little larger that I could do in people's living rooms that would be impactful. So I said, I guess the fastest way to build a larger act is to take something that I've already got that's small, close up, and I was getting a lot of mileage out of the floating bill in the restaurants. I had a lot of different moves with it, and I was kind of a thread head from the beginning, and so I basically had this in my mind that I wanted to take the floating bill and somehow enlarge it for stage. One day, I saw a bartender make a paper flower at a bar out of a cocktail napkin, give it to a customer, and I just thought immediately, that's it. It's a beautiful little thing that's a giveaway that it could be flash paper in the beginning. You could light it, have a big magical thing at the end, a climax, and give them the flower. You could either go romantic or whatever. There's a lot of different ways to do it. You could use all the animation from the beginning, and it just kind of fell together pretty quickly after I saw that paper rose from the bartender. So, and then I put it in my parlor act and won Parlor Magician of the Year, and then Copperfield saw me do it at some PCAM convention and asked if he could do it on TV, and so sure, why not? And
I believe he still does it, doesn't he?
He sure does. I think it's the longest running continuous trick in his act, in his show. He's done a lot of amazing things, but they kind of come and go, and this one's kind of stuck in the show for 30 years.
Well, that's saying something, isn't it? Yeah, because quite rightly and deservedly, you have a creative fellowship at the Academy of Magical Arts, aka the Magic Castle, to those who don't know what that is. So, richly deserved. Just backtrack there for all the magicians sitting here watching and listening. Did you hear Mr. James go, I saw that, then thought I could do this, and then turned it into that? That is why you get creative fellowships and get known as an inventor and the person doing creative magic.
The funny part about that routine is that at first I was using a 20-something girl to help on stage with it, and it always had a weird vibe. I'm not really the Rico Suave kind of guy that can pull off the hey, I'm so sexy kind of a thing. It's not my bag, but the 20-something girl on stage was always kind of, they were insecure about how they looked. Is my hair okay? Am I, so they never really got into it in the way that I wanted. And sometimes they would think, oh, is this guy trying to pick up on me? So it just had a little smell of a vibe there that I didn't really care for. So one day there were no young ladies in the audience, and it was all older ladies, and I just did the effect with a lady who was probably in her 70s, and it was it just changed the whole vibe, and it was completely by accident, and but it was after doing the trick for 20 years, and so it was just so sweet that it was like, how often do you give your grandmother a rose? It was really, really sweet, and it changed the whole vibe. So then I thought, let's try it with the opposite end, so then I did it, tried it with a kid, a 6-year-old, and And then what I realized is that, there's one moment in the trick where you get her to make it wiggle her finger and make it animate. So you're kind of giving her the power to do this, and she really believes it. And that's the moment. That's the money shot is when you have the camera on her face and she really believes it. It just sends electricity through the crowd. So now I like to do it in the middle of the audience. With a young person.
And it plays so well. I mean, I've never seen you do that live. I've seen you do it with a young person in the audience in a couple of different shows, and it's just the only word I can think of is riveting. You've got all these people in a huge theater, just watching this happen.
Well, and the nice part too is that you have them. You have all these people sitting around where you're doing it, and their faces are your background. So they're sitting right next to you, and they're like, what is going on? So you can see that they have no idea how it's working and they're so close. So it really plays to a huge audience. And luckily with the Illusionist, we're super well produced, and so they've got high digital camera stuff and these really great huge LED screens. So it plays really crisp and clean to the back row.
Everybody can see it clearly as to what's happening, because sometimes you get that, with one screen up there and everyone's kind of craning their necks and you lose the magic. You very rightly mentioned, because you've got all this high-end, high-tech stuff, it enhances the magic. It's like having a nice-looking table on stage. You're not doing anything with it, but it enhances the set, so to speak. Speaking of large audiences, Kevin, of course you've toured, with your shows, The Illusionists, in different places with different great people in the cast, etc. And I'm sure this has happened to some of us. It's happened to me. I remember going to do a gig in a theater, and I looked out there and I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. It's like about 700 or 800 people there. And then I went to do like we all do, get ready and everything else. When it was my turn to come on, I had to take I gasped. Because when I first looked at that out there, doing the tech rehearsal, it was all dark at the top. I hadn't realized there was a gallery up there at the top, which probably housed another 1,000 people. That was like, dude, you realize that, and it kind of throws you, it threw me. What I'm really trying to get at here is, here you are, an experienced man, all over the world, playing to enormous audiences. I mean, one or two, several of them. You've done outdoors in Italy, for example, with thousands. It's not like inside. How do you adapt? I don't mean the magic or the props or the effects. How do you adapt your character on stage to deal with that and to reach everybody?
Yeah, so when the audiences are super big, I was lucky enough to do a tour and then a special festival show with Arturo Brachetti. In Italy, and he hired me to do a festival show in the Duomo Square in Milan, and it was for 50,000 people.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, and they had an LED screen. There you go. The size of a building is the LED screen, and we're the little dot, underneath those lights to the right. So you're completely at the mercy of the guy who's directing the camera shots. There's no way they can really see what you're doing. So you just, even Arturo, who is more experienced than I am, he's a big star over there. And just before we walked out, he's like, "Oh, I'm nervous." 50,000 people. He said, "Well, let's just do it." And so luckily, they had 7 cameras shooting it and projecting it up there and cutting live, and yeah, it turned out great. And but yeah, you just do it. You just try to have fun.
Yeah, I guess the answer is
have fun.
Yeah, right. There's no other way of phrasing it. Thank you. You just ignore it. You just do it. You get back over it. I don't know, and I don't know if anybody else does. Anyone else in our branch of show business who's played outdoors to 50,000 people?
Oh, there must be.
Well, there must be, and if anyone knows, for goodness sakes, please let me know and let Kevin know. Well, I don't know of any. I've never heard of that. That's a daunting. I don't care who you are. Like Arturo said, you're going to have, if not butterflies, you're going to have at least two of them wobbling in your stomach for 30 seconds. I don't care how long you've been in this business. That's something over there that a lot of people have to take on board. And I think a lot of us would say, oh, well, we wouldn't play to more than maybe 50 people or, 800 in the theater or a few million on television. But that's a 3-camera shoot. What kind of logistics are going through your mind? It's the tech rehearsal. A 7-camera shoot outdoors.
Yeah.
Don't tell me that wasn't daunting.
Well, I just showed up and did my act for the rehearsal, and the director saw it, and he figured out how to shoot it, and we just rolled with it. Yeah.
Brilliant! How lucky. Now, speaking of outdoors and outside in different places in the world, you were inadvertently involved in some politics in Brazil because they pulled bits of your act to politicize certain things. I mean, it's a country and I know reasonably well also, but there's some well, it's South America, okay? That's it. Enough said. So really, let's just show this.
This was so funny. We had just played the, done some arena touring in Brazil, and we were with the Illusionists, and there was some sort of a political election coming up, and they used our characters. They put their heads on our bodies in the Illusionist, and used us for some like funny political joke. I think I don't even know what it says really, but.
Well, I could tell you, the top says sem comentários, which in Portuguese means no comment. Obviously, it says the Illusionist, that's fine. And then it says Feliz Dia de Bruxas, which is kind of like, if you translate it literally, it says Happy Day for Witches. But the English equivalent, because you can't translate things literally, the English equivalent is Happy Halloween, which is
all right.
You say Happy Halloween in Portuguese, which, contrary to popular opinion, is actually the language in Brazil. It's not Spanish. Every other country in South America, everybody knows they speak Spanish, but in Brazil, it's Portuguese. Yeah. So sorry, you were saying. So they pulled you guys up and.
Yeah. Well, I guess you've made it when you're in the mainstream political, dialogue of the country. So.
Yeah, I think you were telling me. In fact, they kind of did that without your permission. Yes.
Well, yeah, I know. It's a parody, I think. So.
Yeah, and no check either.
No.
Let's go back to working with, I will say casts, but the real word I think is show kids, because these are all top quality magicians in their own right, stars, if you will, and there you are having to tour with these people. It's not like being the Rolling Stones or the Beatles and you all know each other and you tour, and on the tour bus and the plane or whatever, you come together, all these people with different creative needs, different temperaments, and you are bussed or planed or wherever, and you've all got to get together and do these shows. And when you've done that, you yourself have to do that all over again. Now, I don't know anybody that I can ask this question to, and it's a very simple question, but a complex one. How does that feel?
Well, it's really a treat because with the Illusionists, they it started out as a little 3-week opportunity at the Sydney Opera House, and they hired us it was a co-production between the producers and the Sydney Opera House, and say, hey, we're going to go do this show for 3 weeks. Do you want to do it? Yeah. So we did it. But there was some beautiful synergy that happened. There was a lot of excitement in the air. They sold out really fast. It was the right thing at the right time, and it was just spectacular. Very exciting time. We had a live band. It was great. So they got some great video, and it turned into an 8-year job. So the brand kept growing, and they started to have to create multiple units because they could do a bunch of places, but then they needed to come up the next year with something a little different. So they would create a second unit and have those people do the same jobs that we did, and then we could kind of piggyback and go back the third year with another version. And so they would keep moving people around to different units, and then they would if they had some specific unit, but maybe there was the North America unit happening and the European unit, and then they got some sort of promoter in Dubai that wanted to bring the show over there, then they would create another unit just to go there. And so, yeah, you kind of never knew who you were going to be with. But But some of these jobs were like, 20 and 25 weeks long
Mhm.
on a tour bus, with this group. So you really get to know them. And the best part is backstage you're watching, it's funny, like watching Jeff Hobson do the egg bag uh,
Mm.
every night,
Yeah.
every week, every night. You get to really see the nuances and how he just plays with extending a pause here or trying a new joke there. Or, oh, I haven't heard that joke ever before. So you just get to something that you don't really get to see is you really get to see the minutia of it all, and how they handle different situations. And I mean, we were playing the West End in London at the Shaftesbury, and I saw David Williamson have to deal with a little child who decided to go to the bathroom on stage. How
Oh my
often do you get
goodness.
the chance to see how he handles that? I mean,
Right. Yeah.
and stuff happens all the time. So you get to see all the bloopers. You get to see all of the accidents and all of the successes and all of the new gags and the new polish that everybody can put on their numbers. And we're not competing against each other. We're just competing against ourselves and trying to do the best show we can. And it's like going to the best magic convention ever every night. You just get to hang out with them backstage and hang out with them on the tour bus, and yeah, it's great. It's a great life.
No, it is fantastic. A couple of examples, analogies are running through my head. Not really quite fair comparisons, but analogies, if you like, are probably Postmodern Jukebox, Circus Soleil, and back in the day, Harlem Globetrotters. Because like you said, Kevin, they have Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, and then somebody would call you up and go, where are you? Well, I'm in Dubai. Well, yeah, well, I need you right now here in Singapore in Unit 2. Luckily, I imagine they take care of all the logistics of the equipment and things. You just need to get yourself on a plane. Or do you have to handle all that stuff? They take care of it, I imagine.
No, they have their own freight
Yeah.
forwarding company, and but I mean,
Yeah.
we have to like make sure everything's working
Oh,
and
sure.
be there to
Yeah.
have it get picked up. But yeah, luckily they handle all that stuff.
Yeah, because I was going to say, we all know nightmare stories, not just of ourselves, but, good friends in the business. And I have to credit him. It was Steve Daly who once said, if you're not on a plane going in one direction and your luggage and equipment is going in the other direction, you're not really a pro. It should happen at least once. Yeah, I'd love to say that was mine, but that was his. Here we are. Okay, we've now come up to the point where I think I'd like to show another clip of you doing something that I love, and I know everybody loves this. I'm like a super fan of yours. I'm like a 10-year-old talking to you. I really am. Love it. Well, you're magic. You're what dear Eugene, blessings for his memory, said. All magic is theater, and it doesn't matter what you're doing because you do it. It's theater. There's the pathos, there's the emotions, the happiness, the joy, the sorrow. I'm a huge fan. What can I say? I happen to know a number of friends of mine, including our most illustrious president's a huge fan of yours as well. Who isn't? So before we shoot to questions, I think what we'll do is just kind of show this clip. I wanted to talk to you about it because I know friends have bought it from you, the lovely stool, the snowstorm. And let's just see you doing a little bit of that. That's very cool. I had to see that. I think we probably got that clip that we showed it earlier on, that you had the snowstorm in. Now I'm not going to tire Kevin out, and because I think we've delved into his brain a little bit to understand. And my sincere hope is, like me, you are going to go away with your thinking stimulated. Whether you're a performer, doesn't matter what kind of magic you do. Kevin has kindly open a door, if you like, to stimulating your thinking. So what I'd like to do is, at this moment, ask you if you'll be kind enough to just put up any quick questions that you may have in chat. Elmo from Finland, the best piece of magic ever created. Would you like to talk about how the operation was created?
I was at a friend's house, Mike Caveney, and he showed me a steamer trunk and an old antique steamer trunk, and he said, inside that box is everything I've been collecting on cutting a person in half over the last 20, 30 years. And someday I'll write a book about it. And so we were just looking at some of the various things that he'd collected, and one was some photographs from a version of the song that was done by a guy named Johnny Eck, who was a sideshow performer. And they did it for one season in 1937, and then it kind of got disbanded. But it was just a very intriguing method that caught my imagination. So I said, you know what, I want to try to modernize that and add some things to it and kind of create something new using that. And Mike is going to be finishing his book. I think it's going to be out next year. So I'm excited to read it.
Oh, okay. Danskler, who is our SAM Life Membership Chairman, has asked me to ask you if you would be kind enough to say a few words as to how your chaplain routine came about.
Sure. I was working at a kind of a chaotic dinner theater in the early 80s in Anaheim, California. It was called Crackers. It was a great training grounds. That's where I first met Antonio Hoyos, and he was just doing kind of strolling, comedy, just walking around, messing with people in the audience as Charlie Chaplin. And I just realized that he was such an endearing character. He had this instant connection with people that made him so likable. They connected instantly with him, and he was funny. And I had no idea that he, in fact, was had been in magic before. He if you ever see any TV specials of Siegfried and Roy, he played the little Roy when they used to shrink Roy. That was Antonio. So he had been in magic before, and I said, hey, let's work on something together. I'd like to have you perform that Chaplin character in the show and kind of be a comedic foil. So then the idea was just, how can I get this character on stage in the most interesting way? So I was thinking, because of his height, he's 4 feet tall, and with the stylized makeup, he kind of, if he doesn't move, he looks like a mannequin, looks like a doll. So so we did a life cast, and I created this effect where I stack his body parts together in this antique steamer trunk, and then he comes to life and comes out and becomes very endearing and funny. And so it started off as a way to get him on stage in some interesting way so that we could do other things in the show.
Wow. So there you go. Kevin, I was working with David Copperfield, and I asked him what effect that received the best response in his show, and he said, the rose. So, you see, I told you should have charged him more.
Yes.
Brett has said, what is the one effect you have been working on the longest that hasn't come together yet? Interesting question.
Well, I've got 10 things in the pipeline at any given moment. Sometimes you'll work on something and then get distracted and work on other stuff. So it's not like you're working on them every day. Sometimes they just sit dormant for a while and then you revisit them and come back to them. So sometimes they take years and years. That's just the way it is.
Yes, sir. I personally can vouch for that. I had one affair, I'm not going to talk about it, that I'm on and off for 15 years. And sometimes the universe is kind, because had I done it before, I would have been not younger, but not as old as I am, and it wouldn't have played as well. So the universe was kind and put it off. So as I got older and my face aged, it made more sense.
The other funny thing is that I find that I never consider something completely finished. I'm still finding ideas for the operation and for the snow, and the snow I've been doing for a long time, but it wasn't until like 3 or 4 years ago that I realized I wanted to have a bunch of kids sitting on stage when it happened. Before I was just doing the story to the audience, telling the story to the audience. Now I invite a bunch of kids on stage and I tell the story to the kids, and the audience just gets to watch me telling the story to the kids. And their natural reaction once it snows is to leap to their feet and kind of play in the snow. So, which is the actual, feeling about my story anyway, that my feeling as a kid when it first snowed. So it took 20 years to figure out that one little thing to make it better.
That's the emotional hook, isn't it? Quick question for you from me. The children that you bring on the stage, they're from the audience, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Makes it even more of an emotional hook, because, they're going to be talking about it, all the time.
And I think kids tend to, whenever you pick somebody in the audience, they're like, pick me, pick me. And a lot of kids never get to get picked. Well, at the end, I can say, hey, I want to try something super special for the youngest members of our audience. If you want to join me on stage, let's go. And so then anybody who wants to come up can come up. And so the first time we tried this was in Sofia, Bulgaria, in an arena. And I swear to God, we had 150 kids on stage.
Oh.
It was like a tidal wave of kids. And we're just standing on stage going, how are we going to control this? And now we figured out how to let 20 on stage, and the rest can be at a mosh pit in front of the audience.
Is your snow and David Copperfield's snow the same?
It's very similar, yes.
Oh, okay.
But
I did it 3 years before him.
Yep.
That's all I have to say.
Anthony, we had a question actually from Robert Dadris, who sent this to me. It says, when I'm not involved with magic, I'm an architect, and the creative process is really critical to us. Frank Lloyd Wright used to introduce his students to classical music, modern art, ballet, and opera. Do you draw inspiration from other art forms?
Absolutely. Yes. I'm always looking at different designs for illusion, ways to use things in an illusionary way. I'm also looking at things in real life. Like I'll see a certain sign or a street lamp and go, you know what? You could put a mirror right there and it would look perfect. Or I'll walk through a hotel and see a beautiful table and go, that would look great as a table for something in the show. And, you could just add a little bit here and make it work for this illusion. So I'm always taking photos. It's funny. I'm always taking photos of things that I see out in public that totally interest me and it's funny because it's not just prop design. It's also, if you want to learn how to take a bow, watch artists that you really like, not magicians. Watch Frank Sinatra take a bow. Find a concert. Find some video of people that are at the top of their game that are, industry icons, and watch how they manipulate the audience, how they figure out the flow of their show. Watch how these people handle it. I went to go see Wayne Newton one time, and I was completely prepared to hate the show. I didn't think I was going to like it. The first 3 minutes was just him saying hello to the audience. The band was vamping, and he came out and he was blowing kisses and shaking hands and walking through the audience and high-fiving people, making personal contact with almost everyone in the show. So that little old lady from Iowa who got the high five is going to be his biggest fan for life. She made a personal contact with him. He was able to drop, Jeff McBride has this theory about planting, seeds, and you hang a string to these different people, and then you can pull back these strings, and so it's like making a personal connection with someone in the audience. Well, Wayne Newton was the master at that. Yeah, so watching other, Burketti told me, he says, I can't believe that magicians don't go to more theater, study more theater, more plays. And I completely agree with him. You have to see all these other art forms to, watch how a band can control a crowd, a band that you really like. So absolutely. There's so much to learn from other art forms.
Absolutely. It could be a movie. I know in the case of my own son, because his character and movement on stage, he watched hours and hours and days and months of ice skaters because of the kind of character he did on stage. So I'm so glad you brought that up. It's a passion of mine. You're a magician, like Gayton said, figure out how the light switch works. Why does the bread pop up from a toaster? Yeah, it's a spring, but where does that come from? Yes, open it up, have a look.
Just be curious. And, go through life expecting that you're going to find something beautiful and interesting today. You don't know what it is, but it's going to pop into your universe at some point. You live with expectation and curiosity, and it's going to fill your brain with all kinds of little dots to connect later.
Ladies and gentlemen, we couldn't have scripted it better for a closing line. we really couldn't. I don't care if you're an Academy Award-winning scriptwriter. And this was not scripted. This is pure from the heart from Kevin.
And Gayton.
I can't add anything to it. And I think at that point, I'm not even going to take any more questions unless there's something absolutely vital. So, most illustrious, is there something vital that we have to deal with? We just wanted to show that because, you know what? We just want to brag. The MIMC and Gold Star from the Magic Circle, Mr. Kevin James. Of course, Creative Fellowship and everything else at the AMA, Academy of Magical Arts, Magic Castle. There was his certificate saying that he is now a proud member of the SAM. And during one of our conversations, it cropped up, and here we are, and we're absolutely thrilled. And I think this is a great opportunity for our president.
You can't believe how excited I was to be able to sign your membership card. It was one of the highlights of my year so far. So it was absolutely fantastic. And I'm just for you to be here. I
appreciate it.
Outstanding. So thank you so much for Kevin.
And you signed a certificate as well. You got to do it twice.
Yeah.
The card. Yeah. How cool is that? That you become president of the Society of American Magicians and you get to sign the certificate and card of one of the heroes that you kind of were a fan of for years. The last few days, I was thrilled to bits to have an opportunity to share things and talk with Kevin a little bit to prep for this show. And I can tell you, and you figured it out for yourself watching us, here is a wonderful, decent, lovely, charming, intelligent, creative, just the nicest human being. And guess what? He's also a pretty good magician too. So for me, I want to say a personal and professional thank you to you, Kevin, for making the time. Thank you so much for being here, sharing some of your philosophy, some of your magic, and some of your kindness with all of us. Thank you so much on my behalf, on behalf of everyone that's watching, and on behalf of the SAM.
Thank you so much.